Hey y'all, it's Jazzy Marie and welcome back to the channel. Now I know it's been a long time since I've specifically posted a video on here, but with the upcoming second episode in our underrated plural media representation series, the one about Steven Universe that I will be conducting personally, I wanted to catch up and talk about how things have been going outside of the channel, especially when it comes to certain things within our system as well. But I also wanted to take the time to talk about certain types of headmates because I'm not sure if I've mentioned this yet in my previous two videos that were way back when, because it's been very long since we've posted those first two. But I don't think I got to talk about Introversals and sourced headmates. And so that would be very important for when we talk about future media later down the line, because we're a pretty counterpart heavy system, meaning that a lot of the headmates here have counterparts in media that have similar lives to theirs. So, for those who may need a bit of a refresher, or for those who really just want to learn because they haven't ever heard of source headmates, basically a source is external or otherwise material that a headmate comes from, or where they're based off of. A headmate source can influence anything from their identity or personality to just their appearance. And so, the term source is usually used with headmates who were created by the brain rather than those who came from outside of the system, which also happens if that system happens to be spiritual. And we're a partly metaphysical / spiritual system in addition to being a psychological one. So we do have some brain-made headmates with sources, but then we also have what are called introversals. An introversal is a headmate from outside of the system in another universe, timeline, etc., that has a counterpart in this world that's in the form of media. So, for example, and since we're doing SU as a representation episode later on, hopefully before Thanksgiving takes place, an example that I'm going to use is our headmate of Steven that I've met in 2018 and continues to reside in the system up till now. He's been with us for like 5 or 6 years, and honestly, it's been a pretty wild ride. And the full story of that is probably something we're going to have to save for another video. But the summarized version is that I waved, he waved, and the rest is history. And a lot of that history is rather embarrassing. But he's an introversal given that he's from another world, but his character counterpart in this world is a fictional character in a TV show and a movie and an epilogue. And don't come after Future in the comments if you're going to comment, please, because Future is actually really important. And I would rant like all day about the importance of Future as an epilogue, but that also can be saved for another video. Anyways, though, introversals can also have counterparts that are from books or other sources as well. But we have a handful of introversals and a handful of sourced headmates too. But I also do not want anyone commenting on the validity of introversals or sourced headmates in the comments either. Like, we're not gonna go down that rabbit hole of what's real or what's not, because that, my friends, is a question for ontology, a branch of philosophy dealing with the nature of being. It's actually the metaphysics branch, but we're not going to turn this into a philosophy session because that would take an hour, since I'm very passionate about philosophy. So, aside from having introversals and sourced headmates, we also have headmates without a source or without a significantly impacting source, since technically everything has got to come from somewhere, whether it's like a similar voice or hair color or body demeanor. But anyways, when we say source, we're mainly just talking about headmates that have material that has significantly impacted their formation and their existence. So we're glad to clear that up. And speaking of SU, there are a bunch of upcoming events that you can check out on the Streamily website. There's going to be a panel and Q&A on the 15th, which is tomorrow actually. And there's also things going on the 18th as well on YouTube. And we didn't actually find this out until checking out the Roundtable. It's a really cool YouTube channel that analyzes cartoons and probably other types of media as well, but we've just seen the cartoons aspect of the channel. So we encourage y'all to check it out. But this video isn't sponsored by them, so there's that. But we would never have known about these upcoming events if it weren't for them sharing the Streamily information. And so we've saved that link, and now we're passing it on to y'all. And this video is going to be rather short, no more than 9 minutes, because I've really only wanted to touch on Introversals and Source Headmates, a very basic overview, and I also wanted to mention our Headmates that have SU characters as counterparts. Now, something that I've wanted to note, and trust me, this will not take long, I promise, but when it comes to fictional media, remember when we talked about how Introversals are from alternate timelines of media, or a media. Now, in the case of the creator of a fictional work meeting a character that is introversal, it can be speculated that the Introversal in question would actually not be from an alternative timeline or an alternative world that's like mirrored by the counterpart, and instead just that world. Like, honestly, since if they've created that world, like under the scenario that they've created that world and that world didn't already exist and they just found out about it and started writing stories based on that world, since that's also another theory. But in the scenario that the creator actually made that universe and then started interacting with people from it, then the Introversals there would actually not be from an alternative version of that world. They would just be from that world, which is honestly pretty interesting. And that can also be the case with fictives as well, since fictives that are outsourced meaning any source that wasn't created by the system. With fictives that are outsourced, they're often summarized to be alternative versions of another character that is similar to them but not exactly them. With fictives that the system has created, like with fictives that have sources that the system themselves has created, those fictives may identify as that character themselves, and that's perfectly fine because technically they are that character themselves if they identify as that, since that source belongs to the system and therefore to the headmate that that character is most associated with, which honestly I find pretty interesting. The fictives that we have here that have sources that were created by this system, they identify as their counterpart, or they identify as their source. Like, them and their source are one and the same person, and that is completely legal. I know I say legal like this is some sort of law school lesson, but what I mean is that it's reasonable for a fictive whose source was created by the system to identify with that source, because that source is theirs, and so they can feel any way they want about it. And plus, from a metaphysical perspective, it would make sense, given that outsourced fictives can't really control the world that was created by whoever created that show, movie, or book. And the same can go for Introversals. But their world in particular, or in fictive's case, themselves, those are theirs. That's like a personal thing. For example, the Steven that we have here, his world is not literally the same world as the one that was created by Rebecca Sugar and the rest of the creative team. His world is similar to that one, but it's still his, and so while he's not that character himself that you would see on TV or in the comics, it's not like he has no relation to that character whatsoever. It's just that he's not that character literally. Now, in the case of someone who was created by a system and then that system gets a fictive of them, it's perfectly reasonable for that fictive to identify as that character themselves. And in the case of Introversals, their world can also be one and the same. And it is over 10 minutes. It is over 9 minutes. Apologies about that. But that's what I wanted to touch on. So, as always, I hope everyone has a great rest of their time, and be sure to check out those Streamily events because they're going to come up really fast.